Shall we get going? Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Carla, Hendra, and I'm going to be the moderator for this session, which is exciting for me. Thanks for coming, and thanks to the college for putting this entire event together. This is my second time at taking the next step, and I really am happy to be back in Chicago. In a minute, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and talk a bit about what they do today and how they kind of got there, and perhaps talk about how the University of Chicago education helped them to get where they are today. But I thought I'd start with a little bit of background on myself. I've been at Ogilvy and Mather, the global agency, for about 16 years now in a variety of different roles. And right now I'm chairman of the strategic consultancy and innovation group called OgilvyRED, which is interesting in and of itself because we actually call it a community. And instead of I've run lots of big business units and divisions and for hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of people over my career there. But our chairman asked me a few years ago if I would actually drive a community of the top strategists and thinkers in the company. We have about 12,000 people, so it's sort of, if you think the top 10% of that might spend its time on strategy or their time, that we needed to be able to mobilize and really make that a living, breathing driver of business to help answer clients' probably thorniest challenges of growth and innovation. And I think before the advent of digital and social media and the changes that have happened over the last really 20 years, but especially the last 10, you wouldn't have had something like that. You wouldn't have had a community inside of a big global agency. It would have been, start a P&L and, hire some people and make everything hierarchical. But the business has changed completely. And I think for those of you that are interested in advertising or PR or marketing or branding or any of those things, all those terms mean something different today than they did even 5 years ago, but certainly 10. And so, the way that you've grown up and the way that you've certainly been engaged in education has probably been, really different and has had things like social and mobility and certainly digital at the center of it. It's the same as for you, electricity, probably. You don't even make a distinction. But that's not the way that many of the people who are, say, 50 plus, who are inside of client organizations and driving marketing, or who are CEOs, or who are inside agencies, that's not the way that they've always had, an orientation. So it's a time of tremendous inversion and change in our business. And that's sort of exciting to me. I've played a pretty big role at Ogilvy in driving digital because I got into that in the early 90s. And we have a fairly advanced social and mobile commitment, and believe really that if we're not best practice in those areas, that we won't succeed for the long term. So that's a little bit of background. I've actually started my Ogilvy career on the IBM business, where I spent 3 years just doing that globally, running really digital and demand generation and some of the database marketing, which in the time when I first joined, it was a complete focus on fixing the IBM brand, which in the mid-90s was very, very broken. I don't know if you remember, because you're probably not worried about IBM in those days. But there were some fairly, enormous changes that the agency that was Ogilvy helped to really repair the brand and make it part of the success story. And today, what is the probably our most famous brand platform case is the Smarter Planet platform, which if you've been in an airport or anywhere, you've probably seen that. And in the business-to-business environment, IBM is largely considered to be the best practice in business-to-business marketing. So it's been a sort of honor and an amazing journey for me to have started on that business and to watch it grow. I then went on to run our Ogilvy One practice, which was the digital and CRM group, then became co-CEO of Ogilvy Group in North America and chairman of our New York office, and until I started and founded the OgilvyRED group. So that's kind of my background. I would say the thing that I really believe University of Chicago was so instrumental, and being in college here was so instrumental for me and my success, to the extent I've had any, is that I was taught to ask the right questions and to be able to do the kinds of critical thinking and the analysis to make the complex simple. I mean, that's basically what you have to do if you want to build a brand. And the world is more complicated and more transparent than ever before, so you have to do it in new and different ways. But those fundamental skills and all of the work that the core curriculum teaches about the human condition, which it's different today, but it's not that different. The human condition has been pretty consistent for a long time. So anything that I think that comes from those areas is really good grounding for getting into our business. I don't think you have to have a degree in advertising or marketing or anything like that. In fact, it's probably not helpful, and why they don't offer one here. But I also think that new areas like data and quantitative analysis are now a huge advantage, even for creative people. And if you can sort of parse a complex situation and figure out how to make it accessible to people and understandable, often today that comes out of being able to look at data and make it into information and something valuable. So I'm not going to say a whole lot more than that. I just wanted to give you a little background on myself. And if we'll start at this end with Deepak, everybody can do a little bit of introduction and background. Then I'm going to ask some individual questions for the rest of the panel.
Thank you. My name is Deepak Mistry. I'm the Senior Group Manager for Strategic Development and Marketing for Panasonic Healthcare worldwide. Background, as she mentioned, advertising and marketing I never got a degree in. So I'm happy to say that everything still worked out despite not having that degree. But I graduated with a degree in molecular biology. I was going to be, I was one of those kids who was going to be a pre-med, and I had the whole, thing planned out. And said to myself, once I graduated, this was going to be the next step, but that didn't happen. And I think, some of my advice that I think I'd like to extend to you guys is that's okay. You may find your true passion, and still be able to connect it to your degree at some point. Perfect example is, as soon as I graduated, I took a year off before going to med school. I actually worked for a UFC biotech startup. So, UFC was there from the beginning. And from that point, it was a great stepping stone for me to get into sort of a much larger company. I went to a mid-sized biopharmaceutical company, about $100 million in revenue. And, from that stage, I said, look, I think I'm ready to move on to a bigger sort of business. And that's where I came to Panasonic. I would, and I would say the other part that I would want to share in terms of my background is that, if you're pursuing something in the life science, biopharmaceutical, biotech, or any sort of marketing area, in those industries, having a scientific background will help quite a bit. It's just a question of how you apply that scientific background to the real business side of things. I know in many meetings no one wants to hear my dissertation on molecular biology for a particular application for a product. At the end of the day, they want to know how to create demand, how to create concepts that can be engaging, and then, of course, convert customers. And I think the other part of it, what I would say is, as UFC alumni and you guys as soon-to-be graduates, you're some of the smartest people in the world. I mean, that's a given. But when you get into the real world, everyone is not at that high level. And in order to, I think, to progress in any business environment, whether it be a small or big company, you're going to need to master, how you can effectively communicate your amazing ideas and complex ideas so anyone can understand. And second, I think the other part is to be able, if you're really wanting to focus a occupation in marketing, you want to be able to visualize, what you're trying to do. And that could be either from a design perspective or that could be from a strategic perspective. And I think that's what I can at least want to share initially from my background. So huge honor to be here, and look forward to a good discussion.
Thanks, Deepak. Janet.
Very good. Hi, everyone. My name is Janet Isabelli. Can everyone hear me okay? My name is Janet Isabelli. I am the founder of Isabelli Media Relations, which is a public relations agency specializing in promoting restaurants, chefs, hotels, and travel destinations. Some cookbook work in there too, but anything that sort of falls under that large umbrella of hospitality is something that would be considered of interest to our company. My company is fairly young. It will be 2 years old in March 18th to be exact. And prior to starting my own agency, I was with an agency called Wagstaff Worldwide for about 10 years. Very similar in terms of the scope of clientele, but was very fortunate to begin working with that agency at its infancy, and had the opportunity to grow their Chicago practice as well as work with the company in opening their San Francisco, New York offices, as well as building a presence in the Southeast. So I've been doing what I do for about 12 years now, and prior to doing all of that, I was a wayward U of C graduate. I studied Spanish language and literature and law, letters, and society, and a very wise professor named Dennis Hutchinson, many of whom you probably know, told me not to go to law school. It was like, I went to him for a recommendation, and he said, you know what, Janet, don't do it. Don't do it. He said, give it a couple of years, and if you're still that passionate about the law, come and talk to me then, and I'll gladly write you a recommendation. So I dashed that dream, and I proceeded to the Career and Placement Services offices, which is now, I think, Career Advancement, and talked to a guy named Bob Reisman, who at the time was the head of the office, and I said, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do when I graduate, and I said, I can't work at Pizza Capri for the rest of my life, and he said,
Well, you could, but bummer.
I could, and I did actually maintain a waitressing position there for almost 4 years after I graduated, even while I was working full-time elsewhere to keep a little cash flow coming in. And Bob's advice to me was, you know what, Janet, just do something. He said, this is not a time for your ego to come into play. This is time for you to just jump in with both feet first and take a job. Take a job from whoever offers you a job. And that happened to be from a woman named Adrienne Weiss, who's a very prominent branding expert. America Runs on Dunkin' was her idea. And I took a job as her personal assistant right after graduating. And that is right. I was schlepping her dry cleaning. I was arranging for her manicures and her massage appointments. I was, booking all of her travel. I was also running her very, very small office at the time, just answering phones, delivering coffee, taking notes during meetings. And Adrienne works with C-level executives all around the world and does these world-class branding campaigns. And in the 2 years that I stayed with her as her personal assistant, I learned a tremendous amount about marketing and branding and where my next steps should lie. And through a series of events, and I'll be brief just in terms of the trajectory, but I wound up back at the University of Chicago at the college programming office, planning taking the next step, of all things, and Parents Weekend. From there, I had an opportunity to work a lot with the news office here at the university. A light bulb went off saying, you know what, why can't I be the person to call the Chicago Tribune when this Nobel laureate comes to campus and I'm organizing the luncheon for it? You know, it became this aha moment, and through a friend of a friend, I was able to interview with a small PR agency that specialized in many, many, many industries, a generalist firm. I gravitated immediately towards the restaurant and travel clients, and through that firm made a very close friend who stayed a friend and is still one of my dearest friends today, who went on to Wagstaff and who called me about a year and a half later saying, we've got an opening, do you want to jump over? So I jumped over, was at Wagstaff for 10 years, and here we are. And I will say that my biggest takeaway from the college experience, beyond the great writing experience you're getting, beyond the great arguing skills, the critical thinking skills, all of that. For me, the Metcalf internship was a seminal point in my career as an undergrad. I had the opportunity to intern with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra my third year of college, or the summer between my third and fourth year. and worked in the marketing department there, planning opening night, 1998. And made some very valuable contacts there to the point where I was offered a job actually part-time as a senior, working in the marketing office as an assistant at the CSO. And I worked probably 30 hours a week at the Symphony my entire 4th year. And that level of exposure that was granted to me through the Metcalf internship actually made me realize that jobs like that existed, because in the U of C bubble, I had no idea that you could work as a publicist or as an event planner or as a marketeer. So take advantage of those opportunities. And it sounds like there are more now than ever. But for me, that was a huge turning point in my understanding of the direction eventually that I would head after a little bit of a wayward route to start. But do something. I quote Bob Reisman.
Good
Do
advice.
something. Yes.
Thanks, Janet.
Sure thing.
Crysta.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Excellent. I'm getting over a cold, so voice is coming back. I graduated University of Chicago in 2002 with a degree in political science, and today I'm a social media strategist with IBM, which is quite not political science. Exactly. Carla and I never met until today, but I work with Ogilvy, well, indirectly, but quite a bit. And I can actually echo some of what Janet just said with the do something imperative, because when I graduated, I was the first graduating class after September 11th, so there were no jobs. Like, I had friends who had graduated a year before me, and they'd been laid off, they'd had job offers rescinded, and all kinds of scary, horrible things. But when I graduated, I just said, I don't really know what I want to do. Marketing wasn't a glimmer in my eye. But I just knew I needed to do something so I could pay my rent and start paying off the student loans that were going to very quickly become due. So I started looking, and I found a job in nonprofit management doing administrative assistant work, which wasn't glamorous, but it exposed me to a whole lot of different things. I was doing everything from answering phones to running a membership database to processing dues, some basic accounting and financial stuff. And I kept gravitating towards the marketing-related stuff. So, the association I worked for had about 7,000 members across the country. And we did a monthly newsletter. We had a web presence, which was very old school, but growing. And I really enjoyed, writing the copy, trying to figure out how we were going to target different types of members, how we were going to recruit new members and stuff like that. So I kept asking for more and more of those tasks in my job, and it was really only about 10% of my job. And I said, I should be doing this full time somewhere. So I looked, and I found a job about 2.5 years after graduation with a very small startup software company. And I knew nothing about software. I didn't know what customer relationship management was. I didn't know what customer data integration was. And I remember calling my dad and saying, is this a real thing? Is it, is this company going to be around in a couple of years? And, I took just an entry-level marketing job where I was doing things like writing copy. I was interviewing our customers to get their stories and writing them up into case studies. I was doing website, a little bit of development, but really just writing the copy and, working with our sales team to tailor emails to their customers and stuff like that. And really enjoyed it. And it was a small little startup company. We had 90 people. We had, putting greens in the office and foosball tables and all those wonderful things. Free pop. It was great. And we grew and we grew and we grew. And then after about 5 years, we got acquired by IBM. So it was going from little 90-person startup to 420,000-person global conglomerate giant thing with agencies like Ogilvy and a whole lot of other moving pieces. And the interesting thing was, about a year before we got acquired, my VP at the time had come to me and said, "What is this Twitter thing? Is this something we should be doing? Is there a place for us? Are our competitors on it? Are our customers using it? What should we do?" She said, "Don't spend any money, but go figure out if we should be doing this." So I had developed kind of the beginning of a social media strategy where we started using Twitter. We started a blog where we got some of our thought leaders from around the company to start writing their perspectives. We started taking some of these customer stories that we'd been doing and putting them on the blog and doing little podcasts with customers, just little snippets telling their story. And that grew and grew and grew. And when we got acquired by IBM, they had a great IBM corporate level branding strategy, the Smarter Planet stuff, but they didn't really do much at the brand level underneath. I'm still with a small little brand called Infosphere, which is an information management brand. So we started translating what we'd been doing into for them. So, we started a Twitter account for them. We kind of converted our existing blog into something that was a little bit broader. And that's kind of what I'm doing today. I'm working with our very technical people to take their very technical, very confusing concepts that are born in, software development labs and translating it out for the outside world. So to the business leaders who need to decide whether or not they're going to spend $1 million on this product, we're trying to figure out what are their needs, what business challenges are they facing, and how does our software fit that? And then my job specifically is to translate that for social programs. So, we'll go on LinkedIn and figure out what groups are people hanging out in, where should we be posting information, what third-party blog sites are they using where we might be able to build relationships with some of the writers and stuff like that. So to echo what Carla and Janet and also Deepak were saying, the most important things from Chicago were really learning to simplify those really complex concepts, and then also being able to ask questions. I ask a lot of questions in meetings, and I've had bosses who were really annoyed by it, but I've also had bosses who loved it and said, who will bring me into a meeting to play devil's advocate. And then kind of to counteract what they all said, I actually did go back and just finished my master's in integrated marketing communications at Northwestern, in part because I felt like to really advance, I wanted to better understand how the business worked, and I didn't want to go for an MBA I sat in on MBA classes, it wasn't for me, but the IMC program was perfect. And plus, I missed school, I missed Chicago, I missed being able in a classroom with smart people and asking questions, and my master's let me go back and do that. And working full-time while going to school part-time is chaotic and crazy, but so very worth it. So
That's great. Thanks, Crysta. Ben.
I'm Ben. I graduated from the college in 1994 with a rather undistinguished degree in general studies in the humanities.
Hey, I had that one too. Worked out all right.
And no clue what I wanted to do with my life. I was always interested in doing something creative, but I didn't want to actually have the pressure to create things myself. I liked business, but I didn't want to crunch numbers and wear a suit all day. And somehow found my way to advertising, which to me was the perfect blend of business strategy and creativity all in one place. I joined the company I'm with now as an unpaid intern 19 years ago, became a partner 4 years later, and became CEO 3 years after that. The agency had 4 people when I joined, and we have about 160 today. So it's been a remarkable 19 years where never once have I wished I could be doing anything else. I love advertising for the same reason that I love the University of Chicago, which is that it favors and rewards broad, superficial knowledge. I was attracted to the core because I want to do a little bit of everything, but not get too deep into any of it. And advertising is like that. You work with lots and lots of different clients. Every day is different. You're always learning new things in new industries. But when you're working on the client side, you're doing the same thing every day. It's your product, and you own every piece of it. You got to figure out the budget. You got to go to budget meetings. You got to figure out what the product actually does. I have the best job on earth because somebody else has done all the hard work, and I just get to figure out really fun ways to sell things. And the other thing that, I don't want to tell you all that, to be too frivolous, but work needs to be fun. If you want to have a job where on Sunday night you're not drinking yourself to sleep, where you don't have that terrible feeling in the pit of your stomach, holy shit, it's Monday again, I got to go back to that place. And one of the things that I love about advertising is it generally attracts quirky, interesting, slightly defective people who pretty much love what they do, because you either spend 2 years in advertising or 20. You discover pretty quickly whether the particular insanity of the advertising world resonates with you. And the people who make a career out of it are all people that you'd be happy to have dinner with, spend 12 hours a day with at the office, or be seated next to on an airplane.
Great. So just so everybody's clear, we have on the panel, Deepak is client side, so he works for an organization where he's focused on marketing specifically their products, and Crysta's client side too now with IBM. Mm-hmm. You're in the agency business for yourself. I work for a big integrated agency that's global, and Ben is on the agency services side too. So, and there are many kinds of agencies, obviously. Within, you've got a PR agency within Ogilvy. We've got Ogilvy PR as well as Ogilvy and Mather Advertising, Ogilvy One. There are many, many specialty types. Ben's agency represents a great creative, smaller scale from the size 160 people, where it's a really different environment than working at a 2,000 person office. And so you have to think all those things through about what do you want to be client or service side, and they're very different. Or do you want to be big or small? Do you want to be global? Do you want to be local? They're all good things to know. So I'm just going to come back to you, Deepak, and start with a general question about what kind of skills and qualities, for anybody that wants to get into branding, marketing, communications, that business, what kind of skills and qualities do employers look for? And might they look for today?
Great question, and it's kind of I'm doing that right now as we speak, recruiting some people as it is, and I can say it's not easy. But a couple of things that I look as skill sets. I mean, one, of course, having some sort of degree that has something to do maybe with the product or service. I mean, I'm a firm believer if the person has an understanding of the application of the market and the product, that they're going to have a much easier time developing a marketing plan or program. The other part I would say is some sort of analytical skills. I mean, at the end of the day, marketing is becoming a metrics-oriented game. Regardless if you can create a great concept or anything like that, from lead generation to online marketing to social media, all of these great new marketing vehicles that have come to fruition in the past, 5 years even, and they're still relatively young marketing vehicles. They're heavily focused on metrics. So I think we look for people who can have some level analysis. I wouldn't say that we need an economics major per se. And I would say, really the third thing would be really, I would say like strategic creativity. That's like how I'd like to coin it. And that means that, all of you guys are, very brilliant in what you're probably studying right now. And you probably have some great creative concepts on those areas. And when you join your new company, you're going to do the same. But what I would say strategically is that you have to use, I look for individuals who can not only have that creativity, but be able to develop, how am I going to actually, develop a program or develop a particular strategy to use that, A perfect example is, if you have a particular product for, let's say, stem cell research, and that's a very specific targeted market, and you have a concept for a product and how to position it to that stem cell market. Well, you've gotten halfway there in terms of creating this concept that everyone can understand and it can be engaging and creative. But how you develop the particular mechanism through which you create demand is really a mixture of a lot of different things. And for some markets, it may be a very clear-cut method, that you're going to use, let's say, this type of lead generating method, or maybe you're going to use social media marketing, or you're going to develop a campaign that's viral or engaging. But you really need to start from that creativity point and develop that strategic plan. That's what people like myself and even from the agency side, I'm sure they're looking for people like that, because the idea is just the start, So that would be sort of my standpoint on it.
Jenna, would you add anything on skills and quality?
Yeah,
and types of people.
Sure. I think from our perspective, so at my firm, our primary goal in working with our clients is to generate third-party editorial endorsement for our chefs, restaurants, hotels, etc. So we're consistently working with food writers, with travel writers, with business reporters, and encouraging them to write about our clients, put our clients on TV, put them on the radio, blog about them in any manner of fashions, whether we're hosting them at dinners or events or bringing travel reporters from all over the country to Chicago to experience our clients' hotels and restaurants for a week, or just picking up the phone and pitching them story ideas that we think would be relevant to their viewership and to their viewership. So for us, it's really important that anyone who comes and works with us has a real sales sensibility to it. PR is I hate to say it, but there's a lot of salesmanship that has to go into selling your clients and encouraging a journalist to write about it. It's very different than being able to call up Travel and Leisure and say, I'd like to buy a full page ad for $30,000 or whatever the going rate is. That's a sure thing. PR is very black and white, and that we're calling that travel reporter and saying, hey, looks like I'm looking at your editorial calendar and it looks like you're writing about Chicago for your November issue. I've got 3 great brand new restaurants that are slated to open in October that you should really think about. And by the way, we also work with the Trump Hotel. Would love for you to hear about what's happening there, as they just celebrated 5 years. They just got a Michelin star at their restaurant and so on. So, really being able to have that sales sensibility and that tenacity, because reporters can be a prickly bunch. I think now that I've been doing it for as long as I have, there's established relationships with reporters, from coast to coast and of course here in Chicago. But when you're first starting out, it can be a rocky road because they don't know you, you don't know them. And it takes years to build that sort of a trust and for them to eventually consider you as a source for their stories, that ultimately they start calling you instead of the other way around.
So you might need a thick skin to be in.
Thick skin is really important. And I think just too, from the standpoint of our industry, and I think everyone here can probably relate, the hours can be pretty intense. Restaurants and hotels are open 365 days a year, 7 days a week. And during the break before this panel, I returned 5 phone calls from clients who called me between the hours of 11 and 2 p.m. today. And I'm the owner of the company. I'm going to do that. I don't necessarily expect our colleagues to do that, and I don't think our clients are calling my account managers. But if they are they're expected to call them back, and sometimes that means a Saturday afternoon, or sometimes that means a Thursday night until 11 o'clock, having a 10-course meal with a reporter that you've never met. So I think having that thick skin, having that sort of sales, the personality that goes behind being able to sell something, and having a willingness and a flexibility to work really hard to pave the way to those relationships is going to be very important.
Great. Crysta, what do you look for in people?
In addition to what you've said, definitely curiosity. So people who are willing to ask questions and try new things, especially on the social and digital side. There are a million new social platforms and tools and metrics and ways to capture things. And especially being a little bit younger in an organization, at least my experience has been that the senior level people will come to the younger people and say, what is this thing? And should we use it? And can we try it? And it's being able to venture into the unknown a little bit and be comfortable that this will be worth your time. And even if it isn't, you'll learn something out of it, which I think Chicago definitely prepared me for. And also flexibility, as Janet was saying a little bit with the hours, but also just being able to, organizations are changing. Watching my company go from 90 people to 420,000 was a whole lot of change. And a lot of people didn't make the transition well. Like when we got acquired, they kept everyone on board, but a lot of people started leaving after about 6 months just because it was such a complete sea change in everything we did and every process we did. And some people just didn't handle that well. And that's fine. They went to small companies and they're happy and they're doing well. But the ability to kind of step back and adapt, especially as a company changes. My company, IBM, is obviously very, very global, and being able to work with people around the world. I've actually got a team in Bangalore in India, so I do weird hour conversations with them, and being able to adapt to a different way of thinking as well, like more, people are in the Indian school system are brought up differently and don't go through like the curiosity, the asking questions that we go through. So just being able to adapt and bear with people a little bit, it's hugely a valuable skill.
Mm-hmm. Ben, how about you? You must recruit a lot.
I don't think I have a lot to add. I mean, everybody's looking for the same skills, and they're skills that you already have. So I don't worry about you guys being qualified for.
So
jobs.
let me ask you a different question. How do you think the business has evolved, and where's it moving to? Because it's really, I feel, a different business than, especially the last 5 years. We finally, I've been talking about digital for 20 years, and nothing much changed in the beginning. A few Yahoo buys, a few search things. Now it's completely different. So can you talk about the evolution a bit?
Yeah, I think 19 years ago we made television commercials and some print ads, and today what we do is different all the time. I think the biggest, most interesting, and perhaps most troubling thing some days is what Crysta hit on, which is that it used to be the more experienced you were, the more you knew. And now it's the older you are, the longer you've been doing it, and the further up you are in the organization, the less you know. So you all bring invaluable insight and experience to the places that you go that old guys like me really, really need. And if you look at what people complain about, it's people of your generation and your the sense of entitlement of millennials, or the fact that they don't look at careers the way we do, where you go to the same office every day for 12 hours a day and you work as hard as you can. So there's been a complete shift in where, in some ways, power and where knowledge exists in organizations, and it lives with the younger people, and it lives closer to the work that actually gets done and closer to the clients than it does with senior managers and bosses and VPs.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about on the PR side, because I find that has changed even more dramatically, because one of the recent statistics I heard is that 2/3 of the conversation that's being conducted about a brand in the marketplace on any given day is no longer controlled by the company that makes the brand or that is promoting the brand, but is controlled by everybody else. Yeah. So there's now this complete shift in control to elements out of your control.
Yeah.
And in the way that some of us began in the business, it was about coming up with a single-minded message and using media to put it out there. Now it's about paid media is still very important. It's still there. Owned media, earned media. Those are the sort of new models. So in the PR business in particular, it's pretty dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, how many people have gone to Yelp before? Has everyone heard of Yelp? Yeah. Yelp is the bane of my existence. It's the bane of all my clients' existence too. No, seriously, its online reputation has become one of the foremost concerns in public relations from a consumer standpoint. I started seeing a really big shift in 2007 and 2008, right before the economy tanked, and every print magazine that we worked with was, not every, but many print magazines we worked with started to fold. The number of freelance writers in the United States, I think in the year 2009, increased by 30,000 people. If that tells you anything about the level of layoffs, and it became increasingly important to turn to online vehicles to promote our clients. And most of our clients in 2008 had never heard of Facebook or Twitter. They'd maybe heard of it loosely, but it was much like Crysta was saying, like, what is this Twitter thing? And I remember sitting, having this conversation with the owner of my former agency saying, I think we've got to explore this for our clients, because pretty soon the competition is going to be so fierce to make it into these print magazines. And even on television, camera crews were being laid off left and right. It was really difficult to get any airtime for our clients. And we said, we think we've got to intervene and get someone in the house who knows something about something as it relates to social media.
I should just add this one thing on Twitter. You haven't lived until you're giving a speech today, and the live Twitter feed is giving you the critique. You can't see it. Everybody in the audience can see it. Laughing at you.
It's horrible.
Saying horrible things.
It's horrible.
Hashtag it sucks.
Totally transparent society.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember,
turn that thing off.
I remember sitting at a meeting at the Trump Hotel, which is a client of mine today, but it was a client of mine at my former agency as well, and doing this presentation to the VP and managing director of the property and the director of sales and marketing, and it was making the case for social media and why we had to put this luxury brand on Facebook and Twitter. And they looked at me like I was an alien. And I said, listen, guys, and all I had to do was pull up the peninsula on the screen and show them that they had 97 fans on Facebook, and it was still fans at the time before you could like the page. And the VP was like, let's do it. Let's do it right now. Set it up right now. And you know what? And right now that page has well over 10,000 fans. Their Twitter following is well over 10,000. It's something that I am constantly, myself and my account manager, we're constantly managing their social media channels, which is another avenue of offering that is inclusive in our services now. And it has to be inclusive. There are still some agencies in the boutique space anyway that are charging an additional fee to handle social media, but in my opinion, you have to include it because it's that important. The space is still just as competitive now as it was a few years ago.
I mean, I met within Ogilvy PR, we have the leadership of our social at Ogilvy practice, and I met a young social expert who was in New York meeting with the Chanel organization, the famous fashion brand, and she was conducting a change management and training exercise with the entire New York office up to the CEO level, just to teach and explain how the various social tools were going to affect their brand and what they needed to do every day when they went to work, differently. And so these are, and while, you may not charge separately for the execution of social media as part of a program, you can build new revenue streams by doing change management, training, and strategy. Those are separate things. So it's a growth. It's a way to bring your company growth too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do that shortly after we started seeing great levels of success with the Trump Chicago channels. The Trump Hotel Collection out of New York called me and said, "How did you do that? How did you get 1,000 fans in a month on their page? Can you help us?" And bam, we had a whole new revenue stream of training our clients on how to build their own channels. And now we're at a point where every Friday we send tweets to Ivanka, Eric, and Donald Jr., suggested tweets, with the hope that they may tweet about Trump Chicago at some point over the course of the next week. And the minute they do that, we have about 150 to 200 new fans instantly. One tweet. The power of the tweet. But and the other side of this online thing is the online reputation management end of things, and that is an additional fee if you were to hire an agency like mine to monitor sites like TripAdvisor, Yelp, and to physically keep an eye on all of those sites all the time and issue responses from the management or on behalf of the management. That's a 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week job. And there are some great tools out there like Revenate. I'm sure some of you guys use it or some of your clients use it, that allow you to essentially pool all of the online reputation management sites and see what people are writing about you in real time, and you can issue responses in real time. But that's a very real issue that we face with our clients every day.
Great. One thing I'd like to add on that area is these mediums like Twitter and all these social avenues. I think companies that get it wrong, and I've seen many of them, is that they don't use it as a form of engagement. They use it as a broadcasting tool. That's when you fail immediately. So, a true life example for even my company, I've banished any type of PR or press releases written on if we have a new product that we're launching. We don't write a press release as the product's launching. We will only do something if it's related to a new product, if it has some application to a new customer, a new market, something that's newsworthy and actually, engaging at the end of the day. So the mantra I've learned, we've used a lot of outsourced agencies when we needed to do larger campaigns from a social media perspective, and some of the top ones that I've worked with have I think when they're successful, they develop some campaign that's engaging and relevant, and that's not easy to do when you get into very targeted markets. Whether it be in maybe even in the restaurant industry, but even more so in biomedical and life science. It's not a question of you find, going back to that stem cell example, you find these stem cell researchers on Twitter and you start broadcasting what you think is relevant information, and I think engagement itself, when you're making sort of a campaign like this, you have to develop somewhat of your own model, and test it. That's what we have, really focused on, a lot of A/B testing of different type of concepts. So then at least, when you can say, look, I'm going to focus on this method, you have some metrics to go back to and say, look, this is the justification why I've seen to go one direction or the other.
Yeah, and I'll say too, just to add quickly and to sort of piggyback off of what Ben was saying too, is that you guys really are kind of the gate holders, or the gatekeepers with a lot of this stuff. We have a young woman who works with us, who's actually a student at the University of Chicago. She's a 4th year, and she works with us 3 days a week. She was the first person I hired when I realized I was starting a PR agency, which is another story in and of itself that requires martinis. But
okay,
and bartender, and this young woman said to me, she said, "Janet, I really think that we should explore doing some sort of video offering for our clients because it's such a way to connect with people. And I said, well, I don't know how to shoot video. I don't know anything about, here I am, iMovie, and she's like, iMovie? No, it's all about Final Cut. And I'm like, okay, I don't even know what that is. And we have an entire video component to our client campaign solely because this young, brilliant woman thought of it. And she shoots the videos, she edits the videos 3 days a week. I mean, this is what she does for us. And she came to us at a staff meeting one Monday morning and she said, guys, why don't we have an Instagram account? Why don't we have a Pinterest account? I was like, I don't know. Why don't we?
That's what they are.
I was like, do we have them for our clients too? She's like, yeah. And so this, bright young woman said, let's do it. Let's set it up. She set it up for our company. She single-handedly runs it pretty much for our agency. And I would have never done that. So the sphere of opportunity in such a quickly changing landscape that you seem to be much more entrenched in than someone like me, is infinite. So keep that in mind.
And that's so important. I mean, the technology has existed for a long time to allow people with their smartphone to, make a feature film at quality level. And yet, the two things that clients worry about today are lower cost, faster execution. So that's what these technologies enable. But you have to have people that know how to use them and how to take advantage of them, and don't do things the old-fashioned way all the time. Although there's a challenge, though, in the business models to figuring out how to get paid adequately for doing those things. Because if you still are using creative people who come up with big, thoughts, they cost money, and not every YouTube video, as you all know, becomes a shareable event. In fact, far too many are not. But if you if you need talent, that if you have to pay talent to come up with these brilliant ideas, somehow you have to recover that from clients, and they'll look at, well, that video took you 2 minutes to make, or took you a day and a half to shoot and cut, so I don't want to pay the same thing. So there's a lot of tension in that. I want to ask you, talk about what a day in the life is for you, because you have a multiple kinds of clients. You have business to business, you have business to consumer. I know you just came back from CES. Just, what's it like doing your job?
I guess there are sort of three components to what I do. There's dealing with our clients. So I will be sitting in meetings, typically, planning meetings or strategy meetings with our clients, figuring out, okay, what the heck are we going to do? For Amazon.com, we've just launched a new brand campaign. So we talk about sort of what Amazon came to us because they want to be a tech player. They have a massive case of Apple envy, and
join the club, right?
Right.
I don't think I've ever been to a client anywhere that you go, oh, so who are your favorite brands? And everyone says Apple.
Yeah.
Yes, everyone wants to be Apple or Nike.
Yeah.
So that's probably about a third of my time working with clients on what their strategy is. So for Amazon, our solution was for them to really focus on the innovation that they brought into the Kindle and their new Kindle product. We created this new tagline, the reinventors of normal, that tried to get people to recognize all of the innovation that Amazon had driven in the industry. I spent about a third of my time probably inside the agency looking at work. So we have a new campaign that's rolling out globally for our online poker client, Full Tilt Poker. We're shooting that at the end of the month, so there'll be internal reviews where we'll go over scripts and storyboards and talk about what that work is going to be. And I want to make sure that I'm happy and comfortable with what the work is before we take it to our clients.
And Ben, on something like that, for years we talked about we're shooting a campaign, meaning usually TV for TV. But today everything's made on video, and it's made for multiple channels and distribution across public and very targeted and private channels even. How does that change anything about how you look at the work or the skills you need?
Yeah, because you used to think about, you used to make a television commercial and you'd spend $1.2 million to produce this 30-second disposable bit of brand content. And it would run for 3 months and it would never see the light of day again. And now what clients want is platforms. They want big ideas that have long-term potential, that can grow an audience, that can let them own the eyeballs instead of having to go out and find them on TV all of the time. So, for example, one of our clients is ESPN. We do all the work for College Game Day. So last year when we filmed our College Game Day campaign, we also filmed a behind the scenes of the making of the College Game Day campaign show, So we ended up with 9 ads. We also ended up with a 22-minute show in which ESPN could sell 8 minutes of advertising and turned our campaign from an expense into a revenue driver. And that also sort of got leverage on Facebook. So the other thing that we did this year was we had never filmed on an actual campus before. So we had an online contest that allowed fans to vote for which campus we should film on. And the campus that had the most votes, we went there and filmed a commercial. It was Texas A&M. Had to go there and film a commercial in August. I don't recommend that. It's 142 degrees. But it was a fair vote. So the ability to sort of say, hey, it's an ad. It's also a content platform. It's also got a social media execution. That increasingly drives the way we look at creativity these days.
So you said 1/3 clients, 1/3 looking at work.
And a third internal
the
stuff.
bills, probably.
Yeah, paying the bills. No. Probably a third of internal management stuff, meeting with people, career development, focusing on worrying about our culture, interviewing, recruiting, all that management crap.
Yeah. So again, that's agency service side. Crysta, talk about your day, which is completely different because you're client side and you're a small group inside of a very huge organization.
Very huge, very global organization. Yeah. So my day often begins at 6:30 or 7 in the morning. I work from home most days, which is the IBM way because everyone's so global that it saves them a lot of money to not have to pay for offices. So, and up until a few months ago, I never met my boss, which is increasingly common.
In person.
Yeah. And I actually have an intern working for me who I've never met. So, and that's increasingly common.
Was that good that you never met your boss in person, or was it?
He turns out to be a nice guy. Who knew?
Yeah.
But it's a challenge because you can't, without working remotely presents an entirely new set of challenges. You can't pick up on, people's facial cues and how they're reacting to something, how they're responding. You'll get weird silences, and you don't know if it's because they're not happy or because they didn't hear you or because the line dropped, which happens. So
and you keep talking.
And there's a lot of people mute themselves, obviously, if you're on these conference calls, and people don't always remember to unmute. So when there's a big long pause, sometimes they'll be like, okay, are you on mute? And they usually are. We have an internal hashtag that tracks things like this. But my day, typically begins pretty early with a couple of conference calls to, update with my India team because they do a lot of our execution. So we'll build the strategy here and determine this is what we're going to go after. This is the type of content we're going to develop. And then our Bangalore team will actually manage the day-to-day Twitter channels or make sure the blog content gets where it needs to go. And they'll provide metrics. So first part of my day is usually making sure everything's where it needs to be and also reviewing how things are doing and adjusting accordingly. So, okay, maybe that platform isn't doing so well. Maybe we should try this one. We do a lot of A/B testing to see what channel works better than others. Do we get more click-throughs if we use this type of phrasing versus this phrasing? That's a big part of my day. And then I try to squeeze in some actual work at some point where I'm not on the phone, and I'll actually put pretend meetings in my calendar so people can't block my time. So I can actually sit down and do the deep thinking, the strategy, trying to figure out what are the next steps. Based on what inputs we have, how things are doing, what should we do? Like right now, I'm working on a big product launch, for one of our software products. So it's doing some research and determining where are the users of this product spending their time online. Are they on some very, very technical forums, or are they on more business-oriented forums? And which of our messages should go on each of those things? And then eventually I need to wrap that up into something that we can present to the executives so they can bless it or tell us to start over. And then we go to someone like Ogilvy, and magic happens. And then it comes back and we send it out for execution. So that's kind of my day in the life.
So do you spend more of your time because you work remotely on your own, or are there times when you do now go into an office and have personal meetings? Or
it's very,
because it's a very different kind of life.
I actually went into our Chicago office yesterday for the first time since November, and but I don't like the people in that office. I don't actually work with anymore. They're fellow IBMers, but they're not on my team. My team is distributed all over the world, so I go into the office occasionally more for social reasons. That way it's easy to have lunch with a friend downtown or something. So I do mostly work from home. which means the hours can get kind of weird because they're
There's
very
no distinction between working and not
yeah,
working.
but it's also it's good and bad. Like, you know, if I need a break in the middle of the day, I'll go out, I'll go for a run, or, you know, I can go do my grocery shopping in the middle of the day, which is nice. But it often means I'll be, you know, working until 7 or 8 at night. But it kind of washes out.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective, one of the reasons I went to Ogilvy was because I'd been working mostly on North American business at a couple of agencies, and I really wanted the global experience and the international experience. So when I first arrived, I was on IBM for a couple of years and immediately was able to go around the world, basically. And I met more people in the Ogilvy network. I mean, we only have 12,000 people, but I have made really strong relationships around the world. And to me, we use all the tools, telepresence, we use conferencing, we use, whatever you can, email, of course, and now more and more we use wikis and other kinds of social media. But if we don't physically go and sit with people, like I was in London in our office this past week for 3 days, and I pulled a global team together on a topic, and then I was meeting with some client teams. If I don't go and see them and sit down across the table and have some of the discussions, I find we can't really do our jobs very well. So we have a lot of tech clients, IBM among them, but many others that you've heard of, and they have evolved to this model of being able to work remotely. IBM's probably the best example of it, but a lot of them. I think in other businesses, you know, the Unilevers, the American Expresses, you know, some financial services and travel and transportation, they're still operating with, you know, the model where you have to be able to touch, feel, talk to the people that you're working with.
But I'll tell you, to that point, brainstorming does not work over the phone.
Right.
We keep trying it, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I actually, last week I had an 8-hour conference call, which was supposed to be, it was a full day workshop in Boston for my boss and a couple of other people. I didn't get travel approval. So they said, you can just dial in. So, you know, there were 18 people in the room in Boston, and then 6 of us dialed in from elsewhere in the country. And 8 hours on the phone it's not good for anybody. Like, you know, they would...
Well, it just isn't productive.
It's not, because, I mean, the people in the room were definitely getting something out of it, and they were able to kind of see each other, and you could hear the little sidebar conversations. But those of us remote, it just wasn't... It wasn't valuable. And now
Deepak, you're a Panasonic, so that's a tech company too. What do you guys what's do? Your MO? I mean, do you...
Well, I think I have probably very different experience from some of you. I mean, working at a Japanese company in and of itself has its own quirks. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
First, you have to if you can't speak Japanese, you have to master Japanglish, as I coined it.
Yes.
Which is talking in as simple way that you can, but still being able to express what you want to do. But my day in a life, I have a staff of 7 people, but I have our corporate marketing group is in our corporate headquarters is in New Jersey, and then our division for healthcare biomedical is in Illinois. And so, and my president actually is in corporate. So there's a lot of, we use HD video conference. Panasonic made the system. So they make us use it. All the divisions use it. And even with that, I see, it doesn't work as well. You'd think because now you can see the person. There's just some element of being right there face to face. And that's why my boss always approves all my travel requests, even if it means I'm coming twice to New York a month, which is great for me because I can go see the Knicks game, which I'm a big fan. So
I think it depends on, the right tool for the job. So 1 year after the crash, we did all of our global budgeting with our chairman through telepresence, which is a pretty great tool. And we did it, and that was fine. So it was all numbers. It was all get to the, facts. But you can't run a creative, creation of new content and new ideas and new thinking on a telepresence.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I mean, to expand, for my day, it really begins, and most of you guys might share this, is to look at the your inbox and seeing what every morning you know what you're gonna have, or what's it's come, and I have sort of that international situation, so by the time I wake up I could have already 50 to 100 emails already, because when I went to sleep on the Japan side everybody's awake and they're working away. And so, first for me, I try to, light off those fires or pass it off to someone else on my staff when I don't need to be involved. And, the rest of the time really is, we have very good project planning and things like that. But I spend a lot of my time helping, I think, my own staff, of course, executing what we've laid out. And I see, some of the staff members that do really well are the ones that, are very good at strategically thinking. So when they come to meet with me every morning, it was kind of an idea that actually I got from my wife's boss, who said, why don't you meet with your staff members once every morning and talk about their priorities? And I immediately thought that might be just micromanaging. My staff's gonna at some point want to kill me, from talking to me in the morning, especially when they're probably a little bit grumpy, But what I've seen is it's been tremendously effective, because what I see every day is, I have very hardworking people, and I'm sure you guys are going to be as well. But working in any company environment, things are shifting very quickly, and priorities are shifting. So helping each individual with their priorities, I feel, is a big thing to help us execute at the end of the day. I think the rest of my day really goes into, of course, meetings with. This is probably the bigger part. Is I report directly to our president, but he's not there. So then we have our VP of sales and other management that I'm meeting with for a variety of reasons. And the one thing that they're always requesting, I want to understand this on a high level. And you're going to hear this, I'm telling you, over and over and over again. And they'll keep on repeating it until you actually get to that, whatever that high level is. And every management person has their own definition of what that means. Some are good and some are bad. The ones that I always feel that are some of the worst are, no matter how you explain it, they still just don't want to get it, or they don't want to try to get it, and then they'll ask you what your next step is. So which you guys might have all heard of these type of people, but at least the advice I would give you when you get that high level is and it's kind of what I was saying before. Figure out how that whatever that VP or whatever that higher level management person that you're going to have to interact with it one day. Figure out what they, what works for them to get to that high level. My boss, he's a very visual person. So if he sees more than probably 20 words on a PowerPoint slide, he's not going to look at it, and he's probably not going to listen too much to what my idea is going to be. But it's very visual, it's very simple, but based on some strong concept, maybe some 1 or 2 metrics, he's going to get it. And that's what I've seen. So I would say, that's one thing I've learned in the past 10 years, defining what that high level means and being able to do it day in and day out, whether it be a small project, a medium-sized project, or a big project.
Yeah, I think that the effect of sort of the digital revolution on everyone has been this term I heard, 7-8 years ago, which is we're now dealing with people with continuous partial attention.
Yep.
Yes. No one is ever completely really focused. I mean, if you go to a doctor today, you're lucky if you just are getting that person's attention focused on diagnosing your problem. That's very different from most executives are sitting there and they're thinking about everything from what they're going to have to say to Wall Street, to what they're going to say to their staff, to what they're going to say to their client, to what they're going to how they're going to solve the biggest problems. So you always have to. I think the complexity to simplicity thing, that high level, is important, but also being able to deliver things in a way where people who have their attention fragmented can handle it. I'd like to actually open it up for questions now, because there's a lot of you, and I'm sure you're all trained in asking questions. And let's start.
I was kind of curious to know, since you people from both the client side and the agency side, have you guys ever considered sort of swapping and working on the other side?
Grass is always green.
Never. I've always said to myself, the day I went to a client meeting and wanted somebody else's job, I would quit, and it has never ever happened. Clients. It's tough being a client because you're so fully invested in what you're doing. You've got one product. You've got to bring it to life. You live or die with that product. Not everything I do works. We screw up all the time, and the nice thing is there's another client in another day, and I know that every single client we have today is going to fire us one day, but there's always another one coming. And so I think that makes you feel very, very free. I enjoy to me, the agency side is like the best. It's just the icing or the frosting without having to deal with the budgets and the product development and the internal political issues and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think
but there's
the
a downside.
politics are very different in big enterprise and large corporations.
But the downside is, like I said, you're coming to the party at the end, and there are a lot of people on the agency side who become clients because they want to be more involved in the product development. They want more ownership of the idea from the very beginning. They hate the fact that the client is dumping off this piece of crap on your desk and expects you to sell it. If only it had 3 different features, it could have been so much better. So it's a question of what drives you. But clients, like I said, same product every single day, I would be completely bored.
I think there are also some elements of the skill sets that do vary. I mean, I have a few times in my life hired people from the client side to work in an agency, and it's been a big failure because they don't, in general, have the service mentality that you must have in a service business. And especially our kind of service business, which is not the same as working at McKinsey, where, you can have a little bit of an attitude if you want. But even though you're also in the professional services side, it's just that there's a do whatever it takes kind of thing that you have to do. Now that exists on the client side in a different form, because I know lots of clients who will die to make their business successful, but it's it's sort of a different flavor. So I think you have to know yourself, know what you're willing to do, know what you like to do, and that sort of thing.
I mean, I actually had a point in my career where I was gonna go the other side, and it was like a life science marketing advertising agency, and I think what I kind of experienced myself is like what do I really want to do going forward, and that's why I think it's really up to you. You're going to be able to answer that question. I wanted to focus on a particular type of market. I wanted to focus on products that were next generation technology. So I was lucky because Panasonic had that, and I'm given these amazing products where our competitors are like 10 years behind to make the technology even available to their current market. So I think it really depends on the company and the situation and really your skill set. I think for one, I'm Mr. ADD sometimes as it is. So I think focus for me was good, because, and then I also felt a little bit more comfortable being, in a particular market that I felt, I grasped very well from the end user side, from the academic side. So that just maybe gives me a little bit more confidence, in that position. But yeah, I think it really comes back to, what really drives you and kind of how your personality is and your skill set, to pick whichever. And also just how your life is going. One part of your life you may enjoy the advertising world, and maybe from the agency's perspective, and you find this great client opportunity that you could actually hone out your own niche. So I think it really all depends on a
So there are certain jobs that today you could make the leap more easily. So I've had some people leave and go to Google, go to Apple, go to Facebook. Those jobs tend to work out because the people are so interested in what those companies do, and those companies are not one or the other. They're kind of everything. So I mean, startups today often have in-house marketing capabilities. So because they can't afford out of house yet, so you can do both sometimes today. How about some more questions? I'm sort of interested. How many of you have sort of made the decision you're interested in this whole area of advertising, marketing, branding, and do you have a thought on how you will enter the business? Does it seem straightforward, or should we talk about that more? Go ahead.
Question. What do you, at least in terms of when you start out in advertising, do you think it's better to go into a smaller agency where you have the ability to do a lot of different things, or to go into a larger agency and have that kind of training in a big company?
I don't think it's either or at all. I mean, and it's interesting. Ogilvy right now is a big place, but I'm running a very small kind of portal group that is supposed to help catalyze and help push. And I have a lot of young, either associates or young consultants coming in, and they get to work with CMOs and with high-level assignments because they're strategic assignments in a way that you wouldn't if you were at, a very small agency, or if you came up through the account management ladder at Ogilvy, where you have to start in a layer of, a number of people and move your way up. So, I personally started out at a very small place, like everybody else, answering phones, getting coffee, and I corrected my boss, the CEO. I corrected something he wrote, and he never forgot that, and let me open up an office a few years later. So, that was because he had come out of big agency land and had started his own place. So when you work for people who are entrepreneurial in small places, you often do get these different opportunities. That was your experience too. But on the other hand, everybody comes to Ogilvy to steal people because they're the best trained on the planet. So
we hire a lot out of big agencies because people have great big global brand experience and they're really well trained, and we're the beneficiaries of that. As a small company, it's often too expensive for us to invest in those kinds of things.
And I think what you said earlier at the beginning about everything you know how to do is very valuable to our industry today, and that you sort of have innately. But there's a lot you don't know how to do. So, I learned the branding business from people like Shelley Lazarus and Steve Hayden, who made, the 1984 commercial that played once on the Super Bowl, but is still one of the most famous commercials ever in technology, which he made for Steve Jobs. These people taught me more, and I was already well into my career when I went there, about how you build a global brand, what that means, what brand purpose is. That's not something that you learn by going on Facebook. On the other hand, you do learn a tremendous amount about community building and about targeted marketing and about, you won't call it that, but about those things from being on Facebook. Something which, because I have kids, I've been on Facebook since it started, because I was watching what my kids were doing when they were in junior high, and they were stupid enough to let me be their friend. Except for my daughter, she was sneaky. But, so... you have to bring both things together, and it is tremendously fun. So I think you can go either direction. Who else who wants to get in the business already has a job, already has a plan, already?
I have a question.
Yeah.
We use that analytical skills.
Yeah.
What are the kind of analytical skills we're talking about here, or what are the kind of classes do you think we should develop those analytical skills or the kind of experience?
I'll tell you, one class that was really valuable to me, I took early on, was statistics.
Yeah,
definitely.
just going to say.
Definitely try and take that, because whether you do market research or whether you do, data analysis, or whether you're a creative person, everybody has to understand how to read, big amounts of data and turn them into something. What else?
I was going to say even a small minor or a couple of classes in economics. Understanding the market, no matter what industry is tremendously important. How a market grows, how you look at different sort of metrics to penetrate that market. Those are very important. Also, I was talking in the roundtable just recently, how to do market analysis. Nowadays, even in my industry, I have a plethora of market research reports that I can buy for thousands of dollars. Frost and Sullivan, Arthur D. Little, endless, right? Yeah. And what we found, I have the luxury that I can buy them, and when we buy them, more often than not, they're not wrong, but they only provide sort of a broad picture, even if it's focused on that particular market. And I have an analyst that we have on staff, and how it's not a question of getting the numbers, it's how you crunch those numbers can be very important. So if you're looking at let's say I'm looking at the biopharmaceutical market and I see it's growing by 6%, right? And I say, we need to focus on this market. Well, that's only one part of the picture, because that market could be growing by 6%, but you have to look at that a little bit more deeply. You have to look at how much of that market actually needs this particular type of equipment. How much of that market needs that application, so I wouldn't say it's, you need to be, the most advanced, statistician or a mathematician or anything like that, but you should know sound theories of how, market models and things like that work. One thing that we've just done recently, we have a completely new technology in terms of sterilization. industry standard has been heat, and we have a concept using hydrogen peroxide, H2O2. It's been in the pharmaceutical industry for 10 years. So it's industry standard in one market, but in the academic and the research community, it's brand new. No one knows it. But there's a huge advantage. H2O2 takes 2 hours. Heat could take 14 hours. So, and explaining to an end user the time difference, of course they get that. But how you have early adopters created, how you actually penetrate a new technology within particular markets, there's actual models on that and how to do that. And when you get to the level that we are at with some of our products, and we're a mature market, you need to start looking at those type of things, because if you're not, you're just looking at just really the top level. And that really shines through when you're looking at very targeted applications. So and I think the good thing about that is it's a constant learning process. I think if you have those sound principles already studied, then it's a question of being actively researching for papers or for new models that are already publishing about these concepts, because then you don't necessarily need to develop sometimes even the model. Someone may have already done it. So, I think it comes down to also being a good researcher. That's, some of my best analysts are the people who can, go on Google, and be an expert researcher on Google. And I know that sounds funny, but I've seen people who I can ask to find, this particular market data, and they can literally find it in a matter of minutes, where someone else is struggling and giving me information that I know is not usable. So, be a good Google searcher as well.
And that's a great point. And just to add on just a little bit, not only the scary SPSS statistics and regression analysis and all that, which I finally learned in my master's and helps actually, but also just basic Excel skills, basic understanding how to not manipulate, but use data. Because that way, if you are Googling and
no,
you're
mean manipulate.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, when we started doing social media, nobody knew what should we be measuring. We were getting all these numbers, but we didn't know what to do with them. So
make a dashboard.
Yeah, so we started, kind of fiddling around and saying, okay, if we divide this by this, what does it tell us? What does this mean? Yeah. And executives wanted dashboards, so we started, putting some theory behind it, and just a lot of it was just done in Excel, just trying to, we'd come up with a hypothesis. Well, if we measure this and have this number, we'll roughly figure this out, and then just, trying it until something made sense. So.
I think competitive analysis and the skills for doing that.
Yeah.
We'll often take our entry level or most junior people in the group and say, here's the new client. We're doing, we're starting in 10 markets. We need you to do a competitive analysis summary. Now, that's a test mostly to see how well they can put together primary, secondary research sources, because usually a client will give us a ton of their own research. Then we go and get some, and then you go on Google and other places. But to be able to extract and summarize and make it, understandable, that takes some real skill.
And to be able to put it at the high level.
I was just going to say. Does it, no one wants to look at, more than 3 set of numbers.
Yeah, you have to have filtering skills.
Yeah.
When you get resumes in terms of you're trying to recruit who are in their second or third year of college and don't have much agency experience, what is the first thing you look at?
How well it's written. That's what I look at.
Yep.
Yeah. I see resumes that have mistakes in them. Yep. I'll never hire somebody who didn't proofread their thing.
Yeah,
their
same
resume.
thing. I think for me, I think a lengthy cover letter is the kiss of death. Be brief. In our industry, journalists, if you send them a pitch that's more than 3 lines long, it's going in the trash.
Yeah.
And I've sort of adopted that same mentality of brevity in my own world. But one thing that I do look for in an introductory paragraph about yourself when you're sending a resume is what you can bring to the table that I don't have. So when I go back to Cosette, who works with us, who's a student here and who I fully intend to hire when she graduates if she would like to come and work with us full time. I met her at the Women in Business Conference here on campus, just as I was starting my agency, and she sent me the most thoughtful thank you email and a little paragraph about how so many of the clients that I had signed in my infancy of an agency could really benefit from exposure to the college market. I was working with some At the time, we'd signed like the Purple Pig, and we'd signed, some restaurants that were very applicable and affordable to the college market, and also some clients that were applicable to a parental market when they were visiting their students. And she offered just a nugget of inspiration, saying, you know what, I know how to reach those people, and you don't. and in a very polite and respectful way. And it caught my attention. And I think probably 10 people had sent me thank you emails with their resumes after that conference, but hers stuck out because there was a call to action in her note, and she was able to offer something that she knew I didn't have access to.
I would also say, don't give up. I mean, I get a lot of emails and a lot of resumes attached to them, and sometimes there's no jobs. Sometimes you don't have a need for anything, but there are people who sort of, without bugging you to death, but who know how to sort of keep their hand in, remind you they're still out there, remind you they're still looking in a very unobtrusive way, but just to keep that contact going. I mean, you have to have a contact strategy across the board to get through. And a lot of times I will refer people just onto the talent function, because I'm not maybe recruiting or I'm not hiring, and that's what you want to get. You want to get a meeting with somebody inside, just so you can tell your story and you can leave an impression, and so you got to use different techniques.
I just recently interviewed a U of C that's going to graduate, I think in 2013, and she actually asked a similar question, and what I think, what I've looked for a lot, especially with it could be second or third, or person's graduating right now, is we know that we're looking for interns with that type of experience. What I look for is that they look for some sort of practical example that they've done. Maybe it doesn't need to be exactly the in our industry, but something maybe that was related to marketing. And the resume, go outside of the regular resume sort of format of key highlights. I like people who have actually maybe written a little bit more about something that was very specific to the job and how they tackled it. Maybe it's in the email or a cover letter, because sometimes you don't get a chance to read through the whole resume. Right. And if you highlight, maybe this one particular experience that you had that was, somewhat connected to that internship or job, that allows me to read it right away and understand it. The second thing, I think with the modern age right now in marketing, I've seen some pretty cool, nifty portfolio sites for people, and you can do that in many different ways. If you're not a designer or you haven't worked in a big company, there's other ways around it. You can put writing samples, or I know a lot of people who, even though they've had some small experiences with one company, they've been developing their own concepts for just for interests of their own, and those are some of the most fascinating individuals I've seen, where they've not actually worked in this particular company, but they're researching on their own and they have their own perspective on it. And to me that's high level thinking. And I would say the other thing that I really like that I've seen from past applicants is usually I give them sort of some background on some problem or situation, and I'm not necessarily looking for an answer at that particular moment. I just try to see what kind of ideas could they think of, right on the spot. But the ones that are the best are the ones, literally the day before, they'll write me an email and say, look, I did some extra research on this, and, these are my thoughts in a more, more strategic way. I'm not asking for a dissertation or anything like that. But those type of people really stand out to me personally, so. Yeah.
So I think we're at the end. If there's any final questions, anybody want to ask anything? Okay, well, thanks very much for coming to this. I hope you all enter the industry. We need you. Anything else you want to?
No, we just want